Located in British Columbia, Lake Okanagan is over 80 miles long and a popular destination for fishers and boaters. It has a storied and rich history with tales told by native populations for centuries, including the legend of Ogopogo. Ogopogo is said to be an enormous serpent-like creature, which has haunted the deep waters of Lake Okanagan for centuries. Noted author Jason Hewlett joins us tonight, a researcher and the co-founder of the Canadian Paranormal Society, who's lived in the shadow of Ogopogo for much of his life. Now he travels to Lake Okanagan to speak with native experts, researchers, and modern witnesses. There's a lot to talk about tonight. That's why you need to stay tuned to the very best in paranormal programming. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is my Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. You won't know. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Hello, my little darklings. We are here. It's a Wednesday night. I know you're surprised. Where is the Paranormal 60 news crew? I don't know. They went on a small cruise through the Bermuda Triangle, and I haven't heard a word from them since. We've got a special search and rescue team that's gone out seeking them, and I'm hoping that they'll be back with us next Wednesday. Well, at least that's a story I'm going to put out to the public. I, of course, am going to tell you, my darklings, the truth. It's just the fact that I'm off in Oklahoma getting ready to do the big Oklahoma Paracon for the weekend, and we just couldn't coordinate a time to get together with the Paranormal News crew and create an episode for you in enough time. So we are just going to push it off 1 week. You're just going to have to wait. I know you miss Chachi and the Colonel and Sweet Tea, and yes, some of you even miss Greg. But fear not, faithful followers, they will be back. But first, come on out and see me this weekend at the Oklahoma Paracon. Oklahoma Paranormal Association presents Paracon 2024 at the Southeast Expo in McAllister, Oklahoma, July 5th through the 7th. I'm going to be out there all weekend long. There is information so that you can find out where to get tickets. If you just go to darknessevents.com, darknessevents.com. Scroll down the page. You'll see the Paracon there. Click on it and follow that. Or just go to facebook.com/Paracon and you'll be able to find us there. Would love the chance to see you guys, and I hope that you'll make your way out to Oklahoma. I'm so excited. This Oklahoma is one of only 5 states I've never had a chance to go to. So I will soon be taking that off the list, leaving me just 4 more states. Nebraska and Alaska, I will come for you eventually. You can't stay hidden for too long. But first, let us dive into this evening's show. See, water background, dive in. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional. Ladies and gentlemen, author, researcher, Jason Hewlett is here with us. Good evening, Jason. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks so much for having me on, Dave. I like those. I like puns like that. They're my favorite.
Thank you. Well, yeah, we're dads, right? Isn't that the way it works? As fathers, yes. It comes with the territory. The book is The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. And this is an interesting creature, right? Again, because here's another place that has got something that has a deep, rich history, much like Loch Ness, where there have been sightings and stories that have been around for hundreds of years. For listeners that are not familiar with Ogopogo and Lake Okanagan, give us some of the historical background, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, Lake Okanagan, much like Loch Ness, is a glacial lake. It is long, narrow, and deep. As you sort of said in the introduction there, it's primarily got like salmonoid fish in it. And it has had a long history of there being a lake monster, dating like way back before like the European settlers came. The indigenous tribes in the area, which are now known as the West Bank First Nations, have spoken of, believed in, and respected a creature that they don't call Ogopogo. It's got a native name, which is like Nsnahaitku, which I kind of messed it up there, but that's as close as I can get to saying it.
We're not going to know, so you did well on that.
The Ogopogo is actually a made-up word, and that's what not a lot of people understand.
Really?
And so in the end, there's two personas to Ogopogo. There is the indigenous water spirit, and then there is Ogopogo, which is basically a tourism draw to the region.
Okay.
And it's also been confused as this sometimes demonic, sometimes malicious lake monster that the indigenous people used to make sacrifices to, etc. And yeah, it's just two almost totally different things. And going into researching the book, I had no idea that that was the case. So this became a very interesting deep dive, if you'll pardon my dad pun, into something I've lived with my entire life, because Lake Okanagan is 2 hours from where I live. As a kid, we would go to Kelowna all the time on holidays, and I'd have to visit the Ogopogo statue, and would eat up all the tourism-y stuff about Ogopogo and have to sit on the dock and look out at the lake. But I had no idea there was this whole other side to the story, and that to me was really fascinating to figure out.
Let me talk to you a little bit about the element of the water sprite. That's something I'm really fascinated by. Now, I know in a lot of indigenous cultures, they talk about the spirit of the land and the trees and the flowers and the bees, and everything has its own energy, its own soul, if you will. Does Ogopogo, or the native version you said much more eloquently than I will ever be able to try, does that being kind of fit into that world of the water sprites and water horses? Is it something that can take physical form, but is more of a mystical, ethereal kind of elemental creature?
Definitely. Like as far as the indigenous peoples are concerned, it is the lake. Like
Okay.
Unsmahaitku is the lake, and it will occasionally show itself in a physical form. And if you see it, you should consider yourself lucky to have seen it, because it happens very rarely. And it is not this malicious creature that sort of has been associated with the Ogopogo backstory, even though there's only been one encounter in all the history of the lake spirit where there was even something remotely like an attack. The rest of the time, it's very much a playful, docile, friendly creature. But it is the lake. And so what happened when European settlers would come, they would see the indigenous people making offerings, and that's all it was offerings. They would, tobacco, saying a prayer, sometimes a little bit of meat, but nothing like, sacrificing like sheep and horses and all this stuff that kind of eventually got associated with the story. But they would do it when they wanted to travel across the lake, because there's no bridges back then, and it's a big body of water. So you show your respect to the lake. It allows you safe passage to go across. But the Europeans would see that, and then one of them would actually see a manifestation of the water spirit, and they did what all Westerners do. They freak out, and they think it's this malicious creature. And so this little bit of meat becomes this bloody sacrifice to appease this water demon, which is the furthest from the truth.
Interesting. Now, how far back in time can we track the legend of this creature?
Way back. So European settlers would have come out here several hundred years ago. The indigenous people were talking about it since the beginning of time. It's something that has always been there. So we're talking about like a real rich bit of folklore in terms of its background. And even for Western culture, we're going back a good probably 200, 300, 400 years, whenever the first Europeans did make it into the Okanagan Valley, or what became the Okanagan Valley. I think John McDougall, who was the first person who had like the violent attack, that would have been sort of more like, late 1700s, early 1800s. I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm still jet lagged from coming back from Monster Fest. But that was quite a while ago. And his is the one story that is the scary story, I guess you could say, that's attached to Ogopogo, which he was traveling across the lake in his boat, and he had 3 horses, or a group of horses behind him that was attached with ropes, and they were swimming across, and then one by one the horses started to get pulled under the lake, and McDougall had to actually cut the rope, or his boat would have been pulled under as well. And if indeed that did happen, that would be quite a terrifying experience. However, if you talk to any of the indigenous people of the area, McDougall was kind of a player and made a lot of babies with the indigenous women. So maybe he was playing with fate a bit by not respecting the people in the land and their culture. And, Ntsmahiitku came and taught him a lesson.
Wow. An expensive lesson at that as well, huh?
Back then, that would have been expensive. And that's why the indigenous people that like Coralie Miller, who I talked to, who's with the museum, said that you don't sacrifice like a horse. Back then, especially, that's a lot. Like that's your transportation. It's how you farm and work the land. You don't throw like, cows in there because that's you would eat a cow for months. You know what I mean? Like you just don't do that. It's a little bit of meat or a little bit of tobacco and a prayer to guarantee sort of just safe, respectful travel across the lake.
Would they pray specifically to that spirit, or would they just be praying in general, but leaving the food and tobacco for uh, the Sprite version?
Well, when we traveled to Rattlesnake Island, which is supposed to be where we'll just say Ogopogo because it's quick and easy, is supposed to reside. There, it was to me like a very specific prayer, and they have their prayer for when they go into the woods with Sasquatch, right? And they have their own sort of tradition of making offerings for Sasquatch. So it seems very specific to the spirit of the lake, and it's important because water. I mean, especially like at any time, water is an important part of our life. It helps to sustain us, but especially then. They're relying on it for everything back in those days, right? Like you want to keep the water clean, you want to keep it pure. And in their culture, if you have a problem or you're depressed, you take it to the water and you go and cleanse yourself and and help just get past whatever's troubling you. It's a very important part. So the spirit is a very important part of their culture. And so talking to them now, like the way Coralie described it, is like they don't mind that there is this tourist draw in terms of Ogopogo. Like there's Ogopogo stuffies, there's Ogopogo books, it's on hats,
Right.
postcards, you name it. There's like a big statue in Kelowna Park. They don't mind that, but it gives people this false sense of what it is. It is not what they really believe Ogopogo to be.
Well, wouldn't it make more sense then that, like, with their stuffies and the items that they sell, that they would include the prayer to give a little bit more of that contextual history?
Yeah, you'd think so. But that doesn't seem to be how it works. Even the name Ogopogo is completely made up. It comes from a song that was played in the Vernon dance halls back in like the 20s and 30s called the what's it called? The Funny Foxtrot.
Okay.
And it's about some guy going looking for this creature that then it just ended up calling Ogopogo because it happened just to fit the rhyme and the beat. But it
Gotcha.
attached. People were seeing something in the lake and they said, well, that's got to be Ogopogo because it was described in the song as like, it's got like the head of a horse, the body of a snake, and the tail of a whale. Well, that is what people see Ogopogo as. And every artistic depiction is very much like that. So the two kind of became entwined. And what's funny is that the community of Vernon like owned the rights to the name Ogopogo until like the last few years. And they just sort of, quote unquote, generously gave it back to the West Bank First Nations, who could care less because that's not the name of their water spirit.
All right. Now you've got a long history here of of this being. Was there a genesis point to this? Something that you could say, like, I mean, with Loch Ness, there was a religious man who saw it cross the road in front of him, which that really kind of was the first sighting. But as you said, did they always treat this water with reverence as though it was its own living, breathing creature? So that there was no specific genesis, but it's always been just part of their belief.
It has always been a part of their belief. But the first sort of documented sighting by like Western settlers was Susan Allison, who she and her husband lived up off the lake. And she looked out one day onto the water and just described that she saw a dinosaur. And she was talking to people about it. And that's sort of where it was first documented. And she even documented it in kind of her biography that she eventually wrote. There's some speculation that it could have been like her husband that saw it, but it's generally attributed to Susan Allison. So that's really where that started. And then the McDougall story happened and he was a Métis, Métis. So that's sort of the two big genesis points for this story. And then from there, like they would have, people would patrol the lake shores with muskets just in case Ogopogo showed up. And when they would eventually have like, ferries go across, there'd be like an Ogopogo watch, to make sure that the creature didn't come and attack the ferries or anything like that. So it's just interesting how it did. So we made it into this thing. So the genesis point would have been Susan Allison's sighting, for lack of a better way to say it.
Now it seems that every year there's a pretty healthy view of Nessie, right? At least like 6 to a dozen different viewings of Nessie appearing, having been witnessed in one way, shape, or another. How often is Ogopogo sighted?
It is actually one of the most documented lake monsters in the world. And there have been sightings where it's been 12 to 15 people seeing it at once. Like when it shows up,
Wow.
it shows up. It's been a couple of years since there was apparently a sighting earlier this year. The last one that was really documented and went big was in October of 2022. And that's the picture that was taken by Colleen and Dale on their sailboat. And it kind of went a bit viral and was showing up on the news and kind of all over the world, where they filmed what they believe is its head just below the surface of the water with the little nodules sticking up. And you could almost see the neck kind of going down. That was the most recent one, and the one that's got the most attention lately. Before that was like, I think 2019. There's not as many sightings now as there has been in the past, but it's still being pretty well documented. And there's quite a few videos that are out, like the Folden film from the 60s, which was the first real one. And then a couple others, which there's one that actually shows, like, the name of the person who shot the video escapes me, but it was like, looked like about 2 or 3 of them in the water, and this water skier coming along and kind of seeing them and falling into the water. And it was videotaped from people on shore. So sometimes when Ogopogo shows up, there's more than one of them, which is very interesting too.
Yeah. Well, now the photograph that you said was probably the most recent from 2022. There are a lot of really good deep fake photo, Photoshop type things that you can do. I remember during some of the floods that took place in New York, they were showing what looked like shark fins going through the streets. And and they looked very realistic to those of us that are idiots and live in the middle of the country and wouldn't know what it would look like to see a shark swimming down, in Manhattan. But when you saw that image of that creature, does it give you the sense that this is something that is a photoshopped image? Is it nothing more than, I guess, matrixing or pareidolia of maybe seeing some sticks under the water and a rock that might just be reflecting up?
Well, it created quite a stir when it showed up, and I admit, when I saw it, I wasn't skeptical, but yeah, we live in the modern world where anyone can kind of do anything. So when I started researching the book, I actually reached out to Dale and Colleen and I interviewed them about it. And then, of course, when Eli and I went to Kelowna in May of 2023 to shoot Cursed Waters, which the book is a supplement material to, we actually went out on their sailboat to the spot where it happened. And these are people who they don't have Photoshop skills. They were very genuine. The only reason why Dale went to the media is because he's a veteran boater and he was worried something in the water could have been something that someone would run into. But like being out there and just sort of looking at it and looking at the picture, and Eli and I, like, we scrutinized this photo over and over and over again, and it looks so much like the statue and the traditional depictions of Ogopogo that we are pretty confident that they caught something legitimate, that they didn't fake it. When you're out there, it's in more than 250 feet of water. It wasn't bobbing up and down. It was 3 feet across the head.
Wow.
Which is big. So people are saying it's a duck or a dog, or, you know what I mean? No, and they're not trying to profit off of this either. Like they are, like, just not interested, in making money. They just took a picture of something they didn't understand and put it out there because they were concerned it could have been something maybe harmful to the boat.
When they saw it, was it something that was moving through the water and they caught a photograph of it just as it was going under or past? What drew their attention to see it and be that close?
It was just basically in the path that they were going. They were in a sailboat and they were just moving along and they could see something out there in the water. And it was almost like it was below the surface looking at them. And
Wow.
Colleen went up and she just took her phone out and snapped a picture, and they kind of regret not going back and trying to get like more of them. But as Dale sort of says, and it's even quoted in the documentary, the speed they were going at was their getaway speed, and it sure wasn't very fast. So they were just a bit, concerned, because you got to think, if the head's 3 feet across, the rest of it's pretty big. And Ogopogo is believed to be up to 60 feet long. They've seen some that they believe are 60 feet long. So,
wow. Jason Hewlett, our guest, the legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. And the book is out and available. You can go on the links that we provided in today's program guide, so you can go out and place your pre-order or your order for the book and get it taken care of. And remember, rate and review the book once you've had a chance to read it. How did they respond? I mean, when you see something, and I've spoken to a lot of observers of things, of UFO or what they believe are Bigfoot, and I'm always curious of, how did it make you feel afterwards? What was that like? And how did they respond? Did you ask that? And if so, what was their answer?
Well, they were like, it was interesting because Colleen had been going through some very personal things that day, and it'd been a tough time. So she was kind of she didn't want to go sailing, but she was just kind of like, it's the last chance to get out of the year. The weather's decent as it was that year in October. And so she was like, just said like this prayer, like, just please give me something to distract myself from what I'm feeling right now. And then that happened. And she said it was almost felt like this miracle to see it. And it ties into what Corley Miller says. If you see it, you're lucky. So they actually take it very much as just like they feel fortunate to have seen this.
Interesting,
I
isn't
think it's
it?
a neat way to look at it, because I know like you, I've spoken, I'm a paranormal investigator. I've spoken to people who've seen things, and quite often they're left shaken by it, and it changes their entire worldview. And they don't always view it as a very positive experience.
Mhm.
And I've seen stuff too as an investigator that is, shaken and affected me. So it was almost like a refreshing approach on their part. Like,
Mhm.
they felt just lucky to have seen this thing that they've, Colleen grew up in Kelowna. So she's heard about Ogopogo her whole life. And a friend of hers had an Ogopogo sighting when back in the 70s that I do document in the book as well, and made it into Cursed Waters. So it was, when you hear about something your whole life and then you see something that you believe is it was kind of this great little eureka moment for her. And Dale just sort of seemed to take it in stride, but he just thought it was pretty interesting too. So
We just talked on the Paranormal 60 News a week or so ago about the fact that there are people that claim to be able to pray down UFOs, where they have gone and made, said prayers calling on whatever God or beings that they want, and these things appear in the sky. And it's interesting. She put out a prayer setting that intention again to have something occur, and it's there. And then when you look at the indigenous peoples and the fact that they would do prayers and lay things at the side of the water as a gift and token, setting their intent and manifestation, that, that would, it's interesting how that coincides even more and more as you look at some of these different types of paranormal style phenomena, how setting that intention can really have an impact into the experience itself.
well, absolutely. That's right. I think like so much of this has like a spiritual component to it.
Mhm.
And I know like cryptozoologists don't like to talk about that because they're they want to prove it to science and they want to bring it forward with irrefutable proof. But I believe, and especially like working on this book and the documentary, like coming out the other side, I think these cryptids aren't necessarily like fully always flesh and blood creatures. I'm beginning to think that there's definitely a supernatural slant to them. And that's part of the reason why we haven't had any luck with bodies and things like that, right? I do lean heavily into the indigenous belief now when it comes to Ogopogo, which I know isn't going to be a popular opinion to take, but that's kind of where I'm standing. And I think Bigfoot fits into that too.
Listen, science just came out in the last few years and said that they believe that some inanimate objects may actually have a form of consciousness. So when you've got something as powerful as water, right? It brings life. It is moving. It is, its own form of energy. Why wouldn't it take on attributes to be something that we would see? And in every culture around the world, there are iterations of dragons, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Not iterations of dinosaurs per se, but iterations of dragons. So it's compelling that maybe at one point we were more in touch with the spirits and elements of the land, and this is what the representation of these creatures and beings look like. A recent thing I just heard was, look at the Chinese. In their calendar, they have the Chinese calendar, and every one of the creatures are actual animals, and then there's the dragon.
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, what were they basing that on? Was that, and their dragons are usually flying in the sky. Is that the heat or the fire of the sun? Is that the air itself, the way it moves and undulates? Why not believe that these things existed and that they do have their own form of consciousness and physicality? Maybe not in the way we would expect, but there's something ethereal to them. I don't know why science would be so against it. I mean, you obviously they want to, if you can't touch it, taste it, slap it up, flip it, rub it down, oh no, then it's just it's not real. And I think, if we could just find a way to get back to the old belief systems and open up, I wonder how much more incredible this world would be.
Well, I agree 100%, Dave. And there's a book written by Colin Wilson called The Occult, and it came kind of out in the 70s. And he calls it Faculty X. And he went into writing the book. He was like a sci-fi author and everything, but he was challenged to write this book on the occult, but the paranormal, basically. And through his research, and it's a huge book. It was like 800 pages. He came up. He would call it Faculty X, and he said it's basically. When we were basically living on the plains as hunter-gatherers and had to rely on our instincts and everything to survive, we were tapped into Faculty X, and that's how we survived. And we were in tune with all this supernatural stuff around us. And it's only as we've gone and became more quote unquote civilized and, created our institutions and our cities and everything that we've kind of just lost touch with that, or most of us, right? And that's kind of where, people who maybe are psychic or who do see spirits, they're just sort of leaning more into Faculty X than other people. And I think there's a lot of people out there who have these experiences or see things like Ogopogo or a Sasquatch, but it is contrary to their worldview and what they've been told, how the world works. They just don't want to think about it. It's like, when people used to have trauma and they just, someone would get hurt or killed, and we're just not talking about it. It didn't happen. And I think that's what happens with this. But I think it's still here. It's still all around us. And people who have these paranormal experiences, they're just tapping into this Faculty X. That Colin Wilson calls it. You can call it whatever you want.
We'll talk about more of the strange encounters and sightings and beliefs behind what this creature is. And are there other sightings near Okanagan? Bigfoot, aliens, UFOs, ghosts. We'll discuss that and so much more with our guest, Jason Hewlett, right here on the Paranormal 60.
All right, folks. Summer is here, and the Paranormal 60 swag shop has all your supernatural summer must-haves. To comfortable, breathable tank tops for both men and women, to a paranormal investigator's must-have tool, a Bluetooth speaker for those EVP burst sessions that you want to do. Or you could hang out at a cemetery at night and rock out with the dead with some wicked, wicked tunes. And don't forget your Paranormal 60 sling bag, which you can carry all your summer stuff in while you're out and on the go. And don't forget our #1 seller, the travel mug. It's important to stay hydrated, especially in those dank and hot places y'all investigate, especially in the summer. All you got to do is go to paranormal60.com, click the swag shop tab at the top of the page, and then go to the Paranormal 60 collection, and that's where you'll find all your summer must-haves from the Paranormal 60 swag shop. And remember, kids, stay spooky.
Hey guys and gals, remember I've got the Palmer House Hotel event coming up in August 16th and 17th. And if you'd like to get out and see one of the most haunted spots in Minnesota, you can join paranormal investigators Dave Schrader and Shane Pittman from the Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devil's Perch and 28 Days Haunted, along with Sarah Lemos, the very attuned and very skilled psychic medium from TV shows like Portals to Hell, The Osbournes Want to Believe, Ghost Town Terror, and The Ghosts of Morgan City. She'll be on hand. We are going to have a great weekend of talks, gallery sessions, workshops, paranormal investigations, and more. Only a handful of tickets still available. So go check out darknessevents.com and join us. Jason Hewlett, our guest this evening, as we talk about the strange and unbelievable creature known as Ogopogo, or at least that's the name we've given it, right? The Native Americans have a different name. Yeah. Jason Hewlett is the author of the new book, The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. And before the break, I was asking about the fact that in this area, you mentioned Bigfoot a little bit earlier. Are there any other strange cryptid creatures like Bigfoot or Dogman or Chupacabra, Mothman type creatures that are seen in and around this area? And what about ghosts?
Well, it's primarily it is Ogopogo and Bigfoot. Those are the two primary ones. We do get UFOs all through the interior. They do pop up from time to time. And then hauntings, like my group, the Canadian Paranormal Society that I'm the co-founder of, we investigate hauntings all over the interior of British Columbia. Like even we've had people doing investigations in Kelowna itself, just south of that, in a city called Penticton. There's the SS Sycamoose, which is an old paddle wheeler that's haunted. We did investigations there. O'Keefe Ranch, which is just like an hour and a bit to the east, has a long haunted history. The paranoid, like, it's everywhere. Like, this phenomenon is everywhere. And it's,
Why do you think that we're not seeing,
there's a reason. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, why do you think we're not seeing Indigenous spirits and their ghosts, especially around places like this that were so powerful to them, to waterways?
Why are we seeing them? Or why don't we see?
No, why aren't we? Yeah. Why aren't we seeing more of that?
I don't know. I think it comes down to like a willingness to kind of accept what you're experiencing. I know we have stories around sort of the Kamloops area, and it's part of all the Indigenous tribes. They call them the tricksters, or the little people.
Mm-hmm.
So, where they'll like mimic voices of people to lure you out into the woods. I think it's just a case of people who have these experiences not being so open to talking about them, especially with the Indigenous tribes. There's been a lot of cultural misappropriation, much like what happened with Ogopogo, and they just don't want to share their stories with us. But people do have hauntings, and when we're approached as a team about them, we do take them very seriously. Whether or not they may be specifically tied to more of the Indigenous stories, or we just don't interpret them that way, or they're just having, I don't know if you could call like general hauntings, you know what I mean? Where it's just
right
spirits, but there's enough activity that happens, but I just think it's something people aren't comfortable talking about, at least in Canada. I mean, Canada's approach to the paranormal, especially in Western Canada, is very different than Eastern Canada, where they're much more accepting of it and talk about it. And even having traveled down to the States, Dave, like I've done investigations like in Gooding, Idaho, etc., where people they just want to talk about it. They're very excited and happy to talk about it. We got into a sheriff's office in I think it's called Mountain High, Idaho, with someone who was with the sheriff's department. They're like, come on in and investigate. And this is a functional, active sheriff's office. And they're like, sure, come on in. And to do that in Canada, Western Canada, where I am, like, there's no way in hell they'd let you anywhere near anything like that. Like, we're just
those lazy, dumbass Americans. What can I say?
We appreciate it.
No, I'm sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there are a lot of police stations throughout the United States that are very haunted, and I've spoken to police, men and women, from all belief systems, colors, creeds, sexualities, that have had weird experiences within the confines of their own police station. So I don't doubt that for a bit. Now, the Bigfoot sightings, is this something that's more prevalent, or is it still considered kind of rare to actually see these creatures?
I'm sure, like, again, if I could get more people to talk about it, it would be more common. I mean, we have Bigfoot sightings around where I live in Kamloops, and I know of a few occurrences where people have actually seen them, and like, they're huge, especially when I've gone out with like people I know who are part of like the First Nations. They talk very freely about these encounters. And even in my son's class, he takes a Secwepemc language class. That's our local tribe. And they would talk about it in school, in the classroom, which I think is a very progressive approach to the Sasquatch topic. And then as a team, we've done investigations all throughout the area. We've heard the wood knocks. And I have also had, I guess, for myself, the closest would be, that sense of like that fear frequency.
Yeah.
Thing that happens. I've had that happen to me twice in the same location, 20 years apart, about an hour from where I live. So then I attribute that to a Sasquatch experience myself.
Now, strange enough, for those of you listening to the show live here on Wednesday, and for those of you that are listening back, at around the 33-minute mark of this program, and it might differ for the audio because I do clip the beginning trailer out, but there was did you hear like a hissing, almost like a breath while you were talking? You did too.
Yes. Now, yes, I heard that. I thought it was you might have made a
no, it wasn't. Trust me, having done TV and radio for 18 years, I'm very cautious with my.
I figured so. As an investigator, I don't tend to go like at all either. Right? You just sort of hold it in.
That was loud. That was very pronounced, and a very loud breath. Let me see from the live chat if you guys saw it or heard it. Let me know. Crazy stuff. I think this has happened to us. This will be the second time within the last month that during our program, this loud sigh came over, but it sounded even louder than that to me coming over on the speakers on this side.
It was quite loud. Like
Yeah.
It's quite loud.
Hmm.
Interesting.
All right. Very cool. Well, you never know. As we talk about all these different creatures and beings, when we speak about them, do we give them power? Do we give them, permission to be part of the conversation? And I know that's a big part of, the paranormal. When you're setting that intention, discussing these things, does it welcome them? Does that bring them forward?
I think it does. I think it's that openness and willingness, right? Like I think it's maybe not even summoning, but I think this is a highly intelligent phenomenon that's very aware of what we're doing, and it's very smart. Like it's almost, like, and I'm sure Dave, you've had this, like, you've done your investigation, not much has happened, and then once you've packed up all your equipment and are putting it away, the ghost walks, up the stairs or something like that,
Right.
just like in his day, or you start
Yeah.
getting that activity. And I know even with Bigfoot, every time we have gone out and like gone to the spot where the person's heard wood knocks for like 20 years, the knocks come from the complete opposite side of the lake, right? Like we've got audio of that. So yeah, it's smart, it's aware, and I think if we're open to it and we're talking about it, that just encourages it. It wants to communicate, but it doesn't want to just be overt, I don't think. You know what I mean? It's having a bit of fun. I think John Keel was sort of talking a lot about it's been around, like we talked about earlier, it's been around, but it's interacting with us for a purpose we're not quite sure of, and it likes to have its fun with us while it does it.
Now, the Bigfoot sightings that you have there, do you think that Bigfoot are like different subspecies of a different, of the great apes or something? Because I hear representations of what Bigfoot looks like, and in many different areas, they seem to vary from color to size to even the smell of them seems to be radically different. Do you think that there are just a subsects of these different beings, or are they like humans? They come in black, white, gray, yellow, orange, whatever.
That's a good question. I've never actually been asked that one before, but you're right. There's a big variation. Like on the West Coast, it's sort of darker fur, etc., quite large. And then there's like the southern states. There's like even been white ones sort of seen, or like you say, the reddish ones, and they seem also to
Right.
vary in temperament, depending. Like sort of in the southern United States, they're quite more aggressive, and then sort of up in the Pacific Northwest, they're kind of a little more calm and docile. I think it's the same species, just different types. That's the only way I can think about it. And much as with our species, depending on the region, you act different. You react differently to things, probably because of how the climate has reacted to you. That would make sense to me.
Now, in dealing with the Ogopogo sightings, do we know, like in Loch Ness, there are long, large eel creatures that are known to inhabit Loch Ness? We know there are sturgeon, which are fish that can grow to 16 feet long and look like a monster to somebody like me who is not an outdoorsman. If I was in the lake and saw that thing swimming up to me, I'd be pretty sure that a humpback whale is coming to eat me. I would be scrambling back into the boat and probably weeping the whole time. But are there any indigenous creatures to Lake Okanagan that could be mistaken for a sea serpent-like creature?
Well, and that's the thing. There's not. Like there
Hmm.
aren't eels. People have said it's a sturgeon. Well, there's no sturgeon in Lake Okanagan. It's in the Fraser River, but not in Lake Okanagan. So there's nothing else in there that people are aware of that could be that big. And I think
Now,
that to me is what
is
fascinating
Lake
about it.
Okanagan a man-made lake body of water, or is it a long time spring-fed
Yeah, it's
location?
a glacial lake, so it's formed during
Okay.
the end of the Pleistocene period, much like Loch Ness. So it is a naturally formed lake where once the glaciers melted, the waters stayed. There are, of course, now like there's the Columbia River, which will lead out of it on the southern tip, but it'll take it all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. And there's a big belief system that there's tunnels from Lake Okanagan that lead out to other lakes.
Hmm.
So there's speculation that perhaps Ogopogo makes its way to other lakes because an hour and a half to the northeast there's the Shuswap Lake, and there's Shuswagi, which is they believe is like the cousin to Ogopogo, and looks very, very well, pretty much identical, just smaller. So some people speculate that maybe this species, if it is a species, is traveling not only up from Pacific Ocean, but is also using these tunnels to travel to other lakes where people are seeing lake monsters.
Are there any correlating sites where Bigfoot and Ogopogo have been seen simultaneously?
No, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't. And in the research I've done, I haven't heard of anything quite like that, which I always think is interesting because there's a lot with Bigfoot and UFOs starting to pop up, right? But
Right.
there hasn't so far, to the best of my knowledge, been a Bigfoot slash Ogopogo simultaneous sighting. But that would be really cool. I would think that'd be
Well, what
great.
about the UAP UFO phenomena over that area? It seems Canada has a pretty rich history with seeing these unidentified craft as well. How about in the Okanagan area?
I haven't heard of any in the Okanagan. That doesn't mean that they're not happening. I know in Powell River on Vancouver Island, there's been a numerous sightings. We've had sightings here in Kamloops of unidentified, flying object, and there have been, especially out towards Mount Paul and Mount Lolo, which was actually a former Canadian radar base facility. Which is now long since been closed, but there have been, UFO sightings up around that way as well.
All right. Well, talk to me a little bit more about some of the more interesting sightings that people have had there. And when you are interviewing these people, how hard is it for you to kind of um, discern between somebody who's just telling a story and somebody who you believe had an actual sighting?
Well, my background is a journalist. I was a crime reporter for 10 years and have interviewed a lot of different people. And I like to think that over that time, and also politicians and police and emergency personnel, that I've developed a pretty good BS meter, for lack of a better
Okay.
word.
Mhm.
So when people do come forward, and it's sort of looking at, like, there's a lot of things you can tell, like how the person is acting when they come up to you, sort of how enthusiastic they are to talk about it, their demeanor, how energetic or not energetic they are. And quite often, like, a legitimate person, sometimes you really have to get the information out of them. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to talk about it a lot of the time. Sometimes people are way too eager to talk about it.
Mhm.
They can be legitimate, but I kind of get always a little bit worried when they come up and they want to talk about, like, you should see, like, the other day I saw something in the sky that looked like a UFO. But then they also talk about when they saw Bigfoot, and then then their house is also haunted, and that, then that just kind of, they're spinning a whole bunch of yarns. But some of the legitimate people, like,
So
they'll tell you the
someone
information.
like me that's had all those sightings. I understand. Thanks for
Yeah,
calling me
like,
out, Jason.
that's a bit different, right? I've seen many different
I don't
things
know,
too.
Jason. Is it different? Is it different?
when, when someone can kind of come up and explain their sighting to you, and you can go back and kind of look, do some research in the area, even try to see where, like, the ISS was that night, what
Mhm.
constellations maybe were visible. And, if the data adds up to support their story, then I believe it becomes a lot more credible. When you present to them the data that maybe shows that there wasn't really anything specific that night in the sky that could be explained away, and they're sort of still adamant, and they can still describe it, then you've kind of got to dig a bit further. And then I'd want to go up and spend some time in that area at night at the same time, with them or without them, to see if we see anything and see if I can discern it for myself. Like, I think you just gotta, you never dismiss someone outright. You just gotta, I think, do the background checks on, not them, because you can't do that, but on the area and the history of the area, in the sightings that could have happened there in the past. So I think it's always good to do your research and
All right.
investigation,
Well,
native research.
let's hear some more of the what you find are more of the fascinating encounters and stories that people have related to you regarding Ogopogo.
Well, that one, definitely the Colleen and Dales one, I think is really fascinating.
Right.
There's one case that happened back in the 80s. I can't remember, the gentleman's name is escaping me right now, but he shot video of what he believed was Ogopogo, and the back tail of Ogopogo coming out of the water and slapping the water. And it was sold to Unsolved Mysteries.
Okay.
And I remember Unsolved Mysteries broadcasting this episode, showing that they believed they had footage of Ogopogo, like really good, clear, documented footage, probably one of the most, dramatic footages of Ogopogo ever taken. And it was a beaver.
Hmm.
It would clearly, if you're from
Ogopogo.
Canada, you know what the beaver looks like, the tail shape, all that stuff. And it was one of those things. I remember me and my dad watching that, because we wanted to watch that episode, because we longtime interest in Ogopogo, and it was shot here. And no one back then, no one could see the video. Like they never posted online. There's nothing online to post to, so they sold it to Unsolved Mysteries. I think the Inquirer got some of the pictures and everything, but it was clearly a beaver. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here: is people who maybe don't know what they're looking at, misinterpreting something very natural for being this very supernatural sort of creature. And that's where you got to kind of, like I said, you got to ask your questions, you got to do your background research, you got to research the area and see what other potential logical answers could come up first before you jump to a paranormal one.
Well, you said there's quite a bit of footage that has surfaced and photographs and strange bits. If there was, let's say, 20 pieces that have been pretty well circulated, out of the 20, how many of those do you feel are pretty credible as maybe having caught something at least unexplainable, as opposed to that one turned out to be a beaver tail?
That's the good thing. Most of the video evidence that has come forward has been quite good. It hasn't been beavers or other things. The Folden film is like one of the first, and it's still considered, I think, one of the best. The other footage I mentioned about the 2 to 3 Ogopogo and the water skier coming in, that one is quite dramatic too. I haven't seen, like, there hasn't been very many that I could say have been be questionable. Like the people have been pretty good about that. I'm sure that if you look, there are some that would have been described away as logs or something like that, but there hasn't been like, not like, you know, the surgeon's photo with Loch Ness, which has been proven to be a hoax.
Right.
So far, Ogopogo, aside from the beaver incident, has escaped hoaxing for sure.
Aside from the beaver incident.
Yeah, that's what we'll call it, for lack of a better word here.
I like it. Let's take our final break. We'll come back. We've got more stories to talk with Jason and an experiment. I'm just curious if it would ever be something he'd be willing to do, or does he think could happen? We'll discuss those points right after this. Oh, my little darklings. Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness is out, and it's available right now. And I would love for you to pick up a copy of my brand new book. You can get it on Amazon wherever you live in this great, big, wonderful world of ours. Or if you'd like to get an autographed copy and you live here in the United States, go to paranormal60.com. We have the standard copy, non-autographed, just $20. Signed copy, only $30. And not only do we have this book, but we have my other book, The Other Side. And right now I'm running a special. If you pick up both books, you can get both books for $40, both signed. Both will be shipped in one package for one price. So go check out all the information at paranormal60.com. The Other Side, a teen's guide to ghost hunting and the paranormal, which is a guide on ghost hunting and the paranormal. Or you can get Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, real life encounters with the supernatural. And not only are they some of my all-time favorite stories from you, but there's a few of my favorite stories that have happened to me in the book as well. So go check it out, paranormal60.com, to order your copies, or you can buy copies wherever you are in the world that are unsigned at amazon.com. And I'll ask you this. Many of you have supported me in buying this book already. If you could just take 30 seconds to rate and review this book on Goodreads or on amazon.com, I would greatly appreciate it, because the more we get of good ratings and reviews, the more they expose this book to a wider, bigger audience. So I would appreciate that as a personal favor to me, your pal, Dave Schrader. Welcome back to the program. Jason Hewlett, our guest. His book is The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. We have a link for that book on today's program guide. So whether you're watching live here on YouTube or listening to the program on the podcast version, it's right in the episode key, and it'll give you all the information there. So make sure you pick up a copy of that book and rate and review it as well. All right. So my question to you, Jason, obviously having worked in that area, what do you think would be the possibility of, if you connected with one of the native tribes there and some of the indigenous peoples, that they would be willing to go out there with you without fanfare, without video cameras, without anything like that, to do a ceremony to see if Ogopogo would make his presence known to you? Would that, first of all, would that be of interest to you, even if you weren't allowed to document it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it would. And obviously, I'm in contact with the West Bank First Nations and Coralie Miller, and I keep following up with them. And I think that's a really fantastic idea because, like, I think like when you have these experiences, I mean, as investigators, like Dave, you want to document it because you want to add it to the catalog of evidence that you've found. But I think sometimes there's a big discounting of the personal experience because
Mhm.
you're the only one there. But I think the personal experience is also it's valid. I mean, if you're experiencing it, if it's happened to you, So why does we have to convince the whole world that it's happened? So I think that's a fantastic idea to go back there with them and do the prayer and just see if something, Insnahaitku wants to come and show itself and not shoot it on video or record it and just be content to, okay, it's there. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to have that experience for yourself. I've gotten to that stage, and I don't know if you're there as well, but having been out investigating actively for 18 years, everything from UFOs to water beasts to ghosts and so on, I'm more content with just going and having the experience. And I'd be happy to tell Jason Hewlett about my experience once it's happened, but I don't care if you believe me or not. This is my experience. I'm excited to have had it. It's something that will forever be etched in my DNA. So I've gotten to that point in my world where I'm okay with it just being mine.
Same. I'm there myself. I mean, I've been interested in this since I was a small kid, 5 years old. I've had a lot of experiences, quite often alone, because that's when a lot of them do happen when you're there.
Right.
And that's great. That's enough for me. I keep investigating because I'm fascinated by it and I want more answers. But the more answers I get, the more questions that come up. So there's a point where you just got to be content with the experience itself. And some of the best times I've had have been going out with my team members and ghost hunting, and not much of anything happens, but we still had a good time.
Yeah. Or you ghost hunt thinking you've caught nothing all night and then go back and review your evidence, and there's a beautiful holy beep second that you missed.
Exactly, because that quite often happens here. And as you know, like sometimes when it comes to EVPs, you never hear it until you're back reviewing, like a week later or something like that. And I think that's just exciting. And the excitement that comes in sending the clip out to your teammates to see if they can hear it as well. And that's kind of the best part of this sort of thing. The big event that happens when something is knocked off a shelf that you didn't see. That's really cool, but there can be quite rare between such occurrences going on. So yeah. It's the fun of it all is just the general experience of it.
So Jason Hewlett, would you go out in the middle of Lake Okanagan by yourself in a boat and jump into the water and just swim around, knowing
Yeah, I
that
would.
there could
I
be
would.
something
I would
there?
do that. Yeah.
Would you do it at night?
Ooh. Is that a dare or a double dog dare? Like, what's
It's a
on the
triple
table?
double dog dare,
Oh
Jason
my
Hewlett.
gosh. Why might
Yeah.
I have to do that? Would someone need to film me actually doing that as proof that I did
No,
it?
I'd
That's
take your word for it. I mean,
take your
why
word for
would
it,
you
right
lie to
on.
me? Yeah.
When I was a kid, we would go on Shuswap Lake and we'd tell kind of
Bless you.
Ogopogo stories. And we'd swim out to the floating dock in the middle. We'd tell stories until it got dark, and then we would have to swim back. That was the dare that we'd always have. And
Oh,
one time there's three of us. My buddy Carl went under the water and went up behind one of them and grabbed the foot and pulled.
oh yeah.
And I've never heard a scream so loud in my entire life. We were all
Yeah.
big, tough guy teenagers, right? Like that was amazing.
Yeah, the nighttime swim, I think, would be the most unsettling to me. I don't like the water to begin with because it's just icky and there's creatures that want to eat you, I'm pretty sure. So that would be a rough time. I know when I went to Hawaii many years ago, 27, 28 years ago, I don't know what was wrong with me, but I went snuba and snorkeling and I was doing all kinds of stuff until they said, "Oh my God, one of the humpback whales or whatever whale is down in that way. It's made its way here early. It's been seen." I was like, you couldn't get me in that water. Everybody else was excited and happy. And oh, these whales are known to come up and throw their flippers on the side of your canoe or boat or whatever. I'm like, nope, take me into shore. I'm done. It's like the last thing you want to be is in the water and then turn around and just see this mountain coming towards you. That's not my cup of tea at all. I'm no hero.
Understandable. Those are and you never know until you're in that moment how you're really going to react. Right?
I know exactly how I'm going to react.
Yeah,
I'm going to chum the water, I think is what they call it. And then, then I'm just opening up to be fed on from all different angles. Yeah. That's weird to me. Are there any I don't know what the waters are like up there. Do you guys have alligators? Do you have water moccasins? Do you have creatures that would gnaw on you?
No, we're pretty lucky that way. We're pretty like killer creature in the in the lakes free. So
Well, now you know
if I
why the
were out,
Bigfoot down south are a lot crankier. They got alligators and pythons and rattlesnakes and copperheads and water moccasins. They've got to be grumpy. They're always getting bit.
I that's a very good point I think to make. And up here they're just kind of like, hey, cool. I go down to the water, I drink some water, I eat a fish, I'm good, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. They don't have to worry about any weird stuff taking place. Is there a creature aside from Ogopogo? Because obviously there are water creatures that are seen around the world, Bigfoot being seen around the world, but are there any creatures that seem to be indigenous to Canada only? When you talk about cryptid style creatures.
There's there's the Wendigo, but I know it sort of is talked about down into the United States a bit.
Right.
But it's really big up here in Canada. And I'm actually started doing research on a Wendigo book myself. And I went up into Alberta where the story really started. And I thought that was really interesting, just how I've heard of it, but just how prominent it is up there and how the locals really, they don't even like talking about it. They believe in it so much that this thing is there.
Right. I was going to say, you must not be too deep in your research because you just said it twice and you're not supposed to even say the word.
Oh, right.
So when it's rapping on your window tonight.
And you're right. You're not even supposed to say it, but I've been saying it for like weeks now because I've been working on it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you got to see the last known interview of Jason Hewlett tonight. So if he goes missing, we know why. Okay, so that's one of you said that they take it very seriously there. Are there many sightings of this, or is this another one of those boogeyman creatures where it seems to take you in the night?
There has been a sighting as recently as last summer, actually, which I thought was quite fascinating at a location called Mameo Beach, south of Edmonton. So I thought that was really interesting as well. Otherwise, I thought it was more just, like the boogeyman stories, because something so horrific happened with the Swift Runner cannibalism and stuff like that was
right.
Sort of it. But they're still seeing it. And actually, there's been sightings even here in British Columbia, down in the lower mainland. So, and apparently somewhere close to where I live. So I think it's really quite fascinating.
Yikes. Now, with this being, I know it's big in the indigenous cultures, right? And native cultures. Is it something that even just the non-native cultures are fearful of and talk about, or is that just part of the old folklore and legend to them?
Well, the non-natives will talk about it. I don't know if they're so much scared of it, but it does come up in conversation, like not like every day, like Bigfoot or like a Ogopogo or a Nessie, but it does come up in conversation. I mean, there's even like Marvel Comics had the character, I think, in like an Incredible Hulk comic or something like that at one point.
Yeah, wasn't Alpha Flight? I think, wasn't he a member of Alpha Flight, the Canadian
that was
superhero
Sasquatch.
group?
That was a member of Alpha Flight,
okay.
Actually. Yeah, showing my comic nerd status here from back in the day. But yeah, it's still around, and I think there was that movie that came out called Antlers.
Yes, which was really a good movie.
Really a good movie. I thought that they even did good research into can't say it, the history of the monster. You know what I mean? But that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Well, Jason, I'm excited to see what you come up with next, and I'll be happy to have you on the show when that new book comes out, talking about the beast that shall not be summoned, and what kind of stories and history encapsulate that. I know you said there's really no negative stories except for that one possible tale with Ogopogo and the horses being pulled down one by one. Do you think that has to do more with the current of a lake and cold waters that might have just impacted and affected the horses, who eventually were just giving in to fatigue and weakness?
See, and that's just it, right? And so that happens. There's stories of a lake demon, and they just attribute it to the said lake demon, the Ogopogo, right? I think that's, to me, feels a lot more of a logical explanation for that than Ogopogo, especially if it is supposed to be like a docile, non-threatening creature.
However, the image you have on the cover of your book makes it look like like an alligator mated with the Wendigo, and this is what we've got. But it's got like
cover by Easton Hawk. He did a great job on that cover.
Gorgeous. And so they have the head of like a dragon. And what does the rest of the body look like?
Head of a dragon, like the body of a serpent, and a tail of a whale.
Wow. That's a whale of a tail for sure. Jason Hewlett, the author, The Legend of Ogopogo, Canada's Loch Ness Monster. The book and the link is on today's program guide. Thank you so much for being here with us, Jason.
Dave, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been exciting and I had a really good time.
Always a great time talking. And I hope that the darkness of the world around us is just a little bit more light with the information that we share here. That, yeah, sometimes it's fun to talk about those scary what-if moments. But remember, let's reflect back. Could it be a scientific answer, like horses that were overworked and tired and long-traveled, walking through cold water and just hitting a current that slowly pulled them down one at a time? No less dangerous than a sea beast, because it could still end up taking the life of the man running the boat that was tied to these horses. But it gives you something to look into, something to examine, and give you a different sense, especially when you hear the legends and lores of these creatures, and they seem to be more benevolent and just coexisting in an ethereal way. And when you hear the occasional negative story behind it, where did that person come from in that story? What was their belief system before they even went into having that experience? Those are the things that we have to keep into consideration, because remember, everybody's experience is different. Everybody's way of perceiving these type of phenomena is different. And what may seem extremely terrifying to some is just simple and normal to others. So remember that while you're having your experiences and seeking answers for many of the different creatures and mysteries that we look at right here on the Paranormal 60.